War pauses, but Tehran calls it a warning shot, not an end. IRGC vows its missiles will rain harder next time, daring Europe to trigger sanctions. Trump presses Middle East leaders to join his peace pact. Netanyahu smells blood, declaring Iran's regime is wobbling and could soon fall. IRGC Intelligence Chief Brigadier General Majid Kademi has declared that Tehran views the ceasefire with Israel as a new phase of an ongoing war, as Iran's security establishment doubles down on confrontational rhetoric toward its arch-nemesis. A June 24th ceasefire ended a surprise 12-day Israeli military campaign which killed hundreds of Iranian military commanders, nuclear scientists, and civilians. In Israel, 29 civilians were killed in Iranian counterattacks.
The war has not ended. We are in a state of temporary pause. The enemy is conducting cognitive operations, intelligence warfare, and psychological attacks, pinning its hopes on creating internal crises. Therefore, the people and officials must enter the field with vigilance.
Kademi was speaking at the 48th Day memorial ceremony in Mashhad for his predecessor, Mohammad Kazemi, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike during the 12-day war. On June 13th, Israel commenced heavy bombing of Iran's nuclear and military sites in a conflict capped off by US strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, before a US-brokered ceasefire took effect on June 24th. Among those killed during the war were several senior military leaders, including Armed Forces Chief of Staff Mohammad Bagheri, IRGC Commander Hossein Salami, IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Amir Ali Hajizadeh, and IRGC Deputy for Operations Mehdi Rabbani. Kademi also warned the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, the so-called E3, against triggering the so-called snapback mechanism, which would trigger United Nations sanctions under a 2015 nuclear deal, accusing Israel of trying to manipulate them as it did the United States.
Today as well, the Zionist regime is trying to push the Europeans into the same strategic mistake witnessed in the snapback mechanism case. Just as they previously misled the United States, they are now steering Europe toward taking hostile actions against Iran. We are issuing this warning explicitly.
Kademi's comments come amid growing concern in Tehran that Britain, France, and Germany may move to trigger the snapback mechanism before the 2015 nuclear deal's 10-year term expires in October. The snapback, created under UN Security Council Resolution 2231, lets any party to the 2015 nuclear deal restore UN sanctions if Iran is found non-compliant. If no resolution is passed within 30 days to extend sanctions relief, all previous measures return automatically. A media outlet affiliated with the IRGC has claimed that Iran's repaired air defences and stock of unused missiles mean it can fend off an Israeli attack and wreak more damage in another war.
Iran's air defenses were damaged early in the 12-day war, but since then Iran has rebuilt and modernized its systems. Israel now realizes that Iran's air defense in a future war would be multiple times stronger. Iran's missile arsenal remains intact, and some of its most destructive missiles haven't even been used yet. Any new war would mean greater destruction in Israeli-occupied territories.
One of the most comprehensive official takes from Iran's security apparatus, which was badly bludgeoned in the June conflict, the article doubled down on an official narrative that Tehran had triumphed and pledged greater future accomplishments. Another Israeli attack is highly unlikely, it added, warning that concerns in Iran of renewed hostility were unhelpful speculation.
In the recent war, Israel bet heavily on political and social collapse in Iran, expecting the public to turn against the Islamic Republic. But what actually happened was the complete opposite of their expectations. Israel has already lost a war it spent decades preparing for. With exposed defense systems, internal political chaos, and Iran growing stronger and more united, a second act of aggression would not only fail, but would bring even more devastating consequences.
In response to the attacks on its nuclear facilities, Iran suspended cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, conditioning any future engagement on new terms. Iran's foreign minister said recently that the UN nuclear watchdog must clarify how it intends to inspect nuclear sites bombed by Israel and the United States. Tasnim contended that Israel's surprise attack was the result of years of intelligence preparation and that replicating such an operation would require years more planning. Earlier, an Iranian analyst said in July that Israel had hacked Iran's entire air defense systems during the war and that more than 100 Iranian missile launches exploded upon activation. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has urged all Middle Eastern countries to normalize relations with Israel after what he called the obliteration of Tehran's nuclear program. It was unclear what prompted the comment, which came as Iranian state media said the Islamic Republic had executed a nuclear scientist accused of spying for the Mossad, amid a crackdown on alleged Israeli espionage following the two countries' 12-day war in June.
Now that the nuclear arsenal being created by Iran has been totally obliterated, it is very important to me that all Middle Eastern countries join the Abraham Accords.
Additionally, the Times of Israel reported that Trump's administration is actively discussing with Iran's neighbor Azerbaijan the possibility of bringing it and some Central Asian allies into the Abraham Accords, hoping to deepen those nations' existing ties with Israel. At the same time, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Fox News in an interview that a future uprising in Iran could lead to peace with Israel.
If the liberation of Iran happens, it will happen because we delivered a very strong blow to Iran's seeming invincibility, and the people will rise from within.
Netanyahu said he was pleased with the responses he said he received from Iranians following his direct video messages addressed to the Iranian people advocating for the overthrow of the Islamic Republic. The Israeli Prime Minister's remarks on regime change in Iran came on the same day Tasnim news agency, an outlet affiliated with the IRGC, called the goal of regime change in Iran a futile scheme by Israel. When asked about the prospect of more countries in the region normalizing ties with Israel in the so-called Abraham Accords, Netanyahu said he remains hopeful that even Iran might eventually do so. Moreover, when asked whether Iran was discussed during a recent call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Netanyahu suggested Iran's superpower ally did not approve of its uranium enrichment.
I took note of the fact that Putin said Iran should not have nuclear enrichment, which is the American position and our position. I thought that was very good.
Netanyahu had previously said during a visit to Washington in July that Israel had rolled back parts of Iran's nuclear program, but suggested that the confrontation with the Islamic Republic is far from over.